I don't think people understand just how unlikely the rise of Napoleon Bonaparte truly was. From a remote, rebellious island, a boy would emerge to shake the world. The island of Corsica rises from the Mediterranean like a rugged fortress. Its mountains are stark and its people fiercely independent. It was here, in the town of Ajaccio, that a child was born on August 15, 1769. His name was Napoleone di Bonaparte. He was the second surviving son of Carlo and Letizia Bonaparte, a family of minor Italian nobility. They were not wealthy, but they had pride and ambition. The Bonapartes lived in a large, rambling house full of children and noise. Young Napoleon grew up hearing stories of Corsican heroes who fought for freedom against foreign rulers, first the Genoese and then the French. This spirit of defiance was in the very air he breathed. Carlo Bonaparte was a lawyer and a pragmatist. He had initially fought for Corsican independence alongside the patriot Pasquale Paoli. But when France annexed the island just a year before Napoleon's birth, Carlo quickly adapted. He saw that the future lay with the French. He secured a place for his family within the new French system. This decision would shape his son's destiny in ways no one could have predicted. Letizia, his mother, was a formidable woman. She was stern, disciplined, and deeply religious. She managed the household with an iron will, instilling in her children a sense of duty and resilience. Napoleon would later say, "It is to my mother, to her good principles, that I owe my success and all the good that I have done." Growing up, Napoleon was a restless and intense child. He was often found by himself, lost in thought or reading books far beyond his years. He was quick-tempered and did not suffer fools gladly, traits that would follow him throughout his life. He felt like an outsider, a Corsican among Frenchmen, even on his own island. This sense of otherness fueled a powerful desire to prove himself. He was smaller than many of his peers, which made him even more determined to dominate them through intellect and sheer force of will. He organized his friends into mock armies, directing them in elaborate stone-throwing battles with the strategic mind of a future general. The Corsica of Napoleon's youth was a place of clan loyalties and ancient vendettas. It was a land where honor was paramount and where a man's worth was measured by his courage and his family's reputation. This environment taught him the importance of loyalty, but also the harsh realities of power politics. He saw how quickly allegiances could shift and how fortunes could be won and lost. The island was a microcosm of the larger world he was destined to conquer. It was a harsh but effective training ground, shaping the boy who would one day hold the fate of Europe in his hands. He was a product of this wild, untamed island, its spirit of rebellion burning brightly within him. At the age of 9, Napoleon left Corsica behind. His father had secured him a scholarship to a military school in Brienne-le-Château in mainland France. The change was a profound shock. He was a small, sallow-skinned boy with a thick Corsican accent, and his French was poor. His classmates, mostly the sons of wealthy French aristocrats, mocked him mercilessly. They called him the Straw-Nose because of how he pronounced his name. This experience was deeply isolating, but it did not break him. Instead, it hardened his resolve. He threw himself into his studies with ferocious intensity, determined to excel and to prove his tormentors wrong. He found solace in the library. He devoured books on history, geography, and mathematics. He read about the great commanders of the past, Alexander the Great, Hannibal, and Julius Caesar. He studied their tactics and memorized their campaigns, dissecting their victories and defeats. He was particularly drawn to mathematics, a subject where logic and precision were paramount. His teachers recognized his exceptional talent in this area, noting his capacity for intense concentration and his powerful memory. While other boys played games, Napoleon was plotting sieges on maps and calculating artillery trajectories in his mind. He was not just studying to be a soldier, he was studying to be a conqueror. His dedication paid off. In 1784, at the age of 15, he was admitted to the prestigious École Militaire in Paris. This was the finest military academy in all of France, the training ground for the elite officers of the King's Army. Here he specialized in artillery, a technical and intellectually demanding branch of the military that perfectly suited his mathematical mind. He was still an outsider, a scholarship boy surrounded by the privileged sons of the old regime. He lived an austere life, sending most of his meager allowance home to his mother. He worked tirelessly, often studying late into the night while his classmates enjoyed the pleasures of Paris. He graduated in just 1 year, a testament to his incredible focus and ability. He was ranked 42nd out of 58 students, a respectable but not spectacular result. He was commissioned as a second lieutenant in an artillery regiment and began his life as a professional soldier. He was just 16 years old. The young man who left the École Militaire was no longer simply a boy from Corsica. He was a French officer armed with a superior education and a burning ambition. The French army had given him a path, a purpose, and the tools he would need to carve his own destiny. The wider world was about to feel the force of his will. The French Revolution erupted in 1789, shattering the old world and creating a new one from its ruins. For an ambitious young officer like Napoleon, it was a time of unprecedented opportunity. The old, aristocratic officer corps was decimated, with many fleeing the country or falling victim to the guillotine. This created a vacuum of command, allowing talented men from humble backgrounds to rise on merit alone. Napoleon, with his drive and military genius, was perfectly positioned to take advantage of the chaos. He embraced the ideals of the revolution, not out of deep political conviction, but because it offered him a ladder to climb. He saw the turmoil as a vehicle for his own ambition. His first major chance came in 1793 at the Siege of Toulon. The port city had rebelled against the revolutionary government and was occupied by British and Spanish forces. The French Republican Army was struggling, its commanders incompetent. Napoleon, then a mere artillery captain, devised a brilliant plan. He argued that by capturing the high ground overlooking the harbor, their artillery could drive the enemy fleet away, making the city untenable. His superiors were skeptical, but they had no better ideas. Given command of the artillery, Napoleon worked with furious energy, placing his guns with expert precision and inspiring his men with his own courage under fire. He was wounded in the thigh by a British bayonet, a scar he would carry for life. His plan worked perfectly. The British fleet was forced to withdraw, and the city of Toulon fell to the Republicans. The victory was a sensation, and Napoleon was its hero. He was promoted from captain to brigadier general at the age of just 24. He had proven his worth on the battlefield. His name was now known in Paris, catching the attention of powerful figures in the revolutionary government, including Augustin Robespierre, the brother of the infamous Maximilien. His star was rapidly ascending. He had demonstrated not just tactical brilliance, but also an extraordinary ability to lead men and to impose his will on the chaos of battle. 2 years later, in October 1795, his career took another dramatic turn. A royalist mob threatened to overthrow the Directory, the new government ruling France. Napoleon was in Paris at the time, and he was entrusted with the defense of the Tuileries Palace. He acted with ruthless efficiency. He ordered cannons to be brought into the heart of the city. When the royalist columns advanced, he gave the order to fire. A whiff of grape shot, as he would later call it, tore through the crowds, scattering the rebels in minutes. He had saved the Republic. This decisive action made him a national figure, no longer just a promising general but the strong man the weak government needed. His reward was command of the French army in Italy. After his spectacular victories in Italy and his expedition to Egypt, Napoleon returned to France in 1799 as a figure of immense prestige and popularity. The Directory, the government he had once saved, was now corrupt, weak, and deeply unpopular. France was plagued by political instability, economic hardship, and the constant threat of renewed war. The people longed for order, for stability, for a strong leader who could end the chaos of the revolution and restore the nation's glory. Napoleon, the conquering hero, seemed to be the answer to their prayers. He was astute enough to sense the mood of the country and to see that power was ripe for the taking. Working with a group of influential political conspirators, including the Abbé Sieyès, a leading director who wished to overthrow his own government, Napoleon planned a coup d'état. The plot was set for November 9, 1799, or 18 Brumaire, according to the revolutionary calendar. The plan was to use a combination of political maneuvering and military intimidation to force the Directory to dissolve itself and hand power over to a new government, a consulate, led by Napoleon. It was a risky gamble. The legacy of the guillotine was still fresh in people's minds, and a failed coup could easily mean execution for all involved. The coup did not go as smoothly as planned. On the second day, when Napoleon addressed the Council of 500, the lower house of the legislature, he was met with furious resistance. Cries of "Down with the dictator," "Outlaw him," filled the chamber. Deputies swarmed him, jostling and threatening him. For a moment, the usually unflappable general lost his nerve and had to be led from the hall, pale and shaken. The plot was on the verge of collapse. It was his brother, Napoleon Bonaparte, the president of the council who saved the day. He rushed outside, drew his sword, and dramatically pledged to run it through his own brother if he ever betrayed the liberties of France. This theatrical gesture rallied the soldiers guarding the legislature. Convinced that the deputies were assassins in the pay of the English, the troops stormed the chamber with bayonets fixed. The panicked politicians scrambled out of windows and fled into the gardens, their ceremonial robes flapping behind them. The coup was a success. That evening, a remnant of the council was rounded up to formally abolish the Directory and appoint 3 consuls to lead a new government: Napoleon, Cas, and Roger Ducos. But there was no doubt who was truly in charge. Napoleon had seized power, ending the French Revolution and beginning a new era. He was now the master of France. By 1804, Napoleon Bonaparte was the undisputed ruler of France. As first consul, he had brought stability, restored the economy, and defeated France's enemies. But he wanted more than just temporary political power. He sought a permanent hereditary dynasty. He believed that only by becoming an emperor could he secure his legacy and place his family on an equal footing with the ancient royal houses of Europe. A plebiscite was held, and the French people overwhelmingly voted in favor of establishing the French Empire, with Napoleon as its first emperor. The former revolutionary republic was to become a monarchy, crafted in the image of its new master. The coronation was planned as a spectacle of unparalleled magnificence, designed to awe France and, the world. It was set for December 2, 1804, in the great cathedral of Notre Dame in Paris. The ancient church was redecorated for the occasion, draped in velvet and filled with symbols of imperial power, blending Roman grandeur with the legacy of Charlemagne. Napoleon meticulously planned every detail of the ceremony himself. He wanted to create a powerful statement of his legitimacy. He even persuaded the aging Pope Pius VII to travel from Rome to Paris to officiate, lending the sacred authority of the church to his new imperial title. The ceremony was a masterpiece of political theater. The procession to the cathedral was a dazzling display of military and civic pomp. Napoleon and his wife Josephine arrived in a gilded carriage drawn by 8 white horses, surrounded by marshals and dignitaries in their splendid new uniforms. Inside Notre Dame, the Pope waited, along with the great and good of the new French Empire, but at the crucial moment of the coronation, Napoleon enacted a gesture of breathtaking audacity. As the Pope prepared to place the crown on his head, Napoleon took it from the pontiff's hands and crowned himself. Then he turned and placed a smaller crown on the head of the kneeling Josephine. The message was unmistakable and deliberate. He was emperor not by the grace of God or the authority of the church, but by his own will and the will of the French people. He had seized his crown just as he had seized power through his own efforts. He was a self-made monarch beholden to no one. The boy from Corsica, the mocked cadet, the revolutionary general, had reached the zenith of his ambition. He was now Napoleon I, Emperor of the French. He had not just conquered France, he had remade it in his own image, establishing a new dynasty that he hoped would rule for centuries to come. With the imperial crown firmly on his head, Napoleon set out to dominate the European continent. The old monarchies, led by Austria, Russia, and Great Britain, formed a third coalition to challenge his new empire. They saw him as a dangerous upstart, a product of the revolution who threatened the established order. In late 1805, a massive Austrian and Russian army advanced into Central Europe, aiming to crush him. Napoleon responded with lightning speed. He marched his Grande Armée from the coast of the English Channel to the heart of the continent in a brilliant campaign that caught his enemies completely off guard. The decisive confrontation came on December 2, 1805, the first anniversary of his coronation. The battlefield was near the town of Austerlitz, in what is now the Czech Republic. Napoleon faced a larger combined army of Austrians and Russians, commanded by their respective emperors, Francis I and Tsar Alexander I. Outnumbered, Napoleon used his genius for deception to lure them into a trap. He deliberately weakened his right flank, tempting the Allies to attack it in force to cut him off from Vienna. He watched from a high vantage point as the enemy columns descended from the Pratzen Heights to spring the trap he had laid. As the Allies weakened their center to attack his right, Napoleon ordered Marshal Soult's corps to storm the now vulnerable Pratzen Heights. The French soldiers, hidden in the morning mist, surged forward, shattering the Allied center and splitting their army in two. The sun of Austerlitz broke through the fog, illuminating a scene of total French victory. The battle descended into a rout, Thousands of Russian soldiers trying to escape across frozen ponds were drowned as French artillery deliberately broke the ice with cannonballs. It was a devastating defeat for the coalition and a tactical masterpiece for Napoleon. Austerlitz was more than just a battle. It was the confirmation of his military genius and the high point of his empire. In a single day, he had shattered the Third Coalition and established his mastery over Europe. The Austrian emperor was forced to sue for peace and the Russians retreated in disarray. Napoleon's proclamation to his troops captured the scale of the victory. "Soldiers, I am pleased with you. You have decorated your eagles with an immortal glory. An army of 100,000 men commanded by the emperors of Russia and Austria has been in less than 4 hours either cut off or dispersed." He was now the undisputed master of the continent, a modern-day Charlemagne. While Napoleon is most remembered as a brilliant military commander, his most enduring legacy may not be from the battlefield. One of his greatest achievements was the creation of a unified legal system for France, the Code Civil des Français, universally known as the Napoleonic Code. Before the Revolution, France was a confusing patchwork of different legal systems. Laws varied dramatically from one region to another, based on ancient feudal customs and local traditions. This created chaos and inequality. The revolution had promised liberty, equality, and fraternity, but a coherent legal framework was needed to make these ideals a reality for all citizens. Napoleon took on this monumental task with his characteristic energy and determination. He established a commission of leading jurists to draft the new code, but he was no passive observer. He personally presided over more than half of the sessions, astonishing the legal experts with his sharp intellect and his grasp of complex legal issues. He cut through jargon and arcane arguments, always focused on clarity, logic, and practical application. He wanted a code that could be understood not just by lawyers, but by the common citizen. He insisted that the laws be written in clear, concise language, free from the ambiguities of the old regime. The code, officially enacted in 1804, was a revolutionary document. It enshrined many of the key principles of 1789. It established the equality of all male citizens before the law, regardless of their birth or social status. It guaranteed freedom of religion and protected the right to property, which was crucial for the rising bourgeoisie class that formed the backbone of his support. It abolished feudalism and the privileges of the nobility once and for all. The code standardized the law across all of France, creating a unified nation where all citizens were subject to the same rules and enjoyed the same rights. The influence of the Napoleonic Code extended far beyond the borders of France. As Napoleon's armies conquered Europe, they brought the code with them. It was adopted in whole or in part in Italy, the Netherlands, Belgium, parts of Germany, and Poland. It even influenced the legal systems of countries in Latin America, the Middle East, and the state of Louisiana in the United States. While it had its flaws, particularly in its treatment of women, who were given subordinate legal status to their fathers and husbands, the Napoleonic Code remains a monumental achievement. It provided a logical, modern legal framework that shaped the development of civil law across the world. At its peak, Napoleon's empire seemed invincible, stretching from the coast of Spain to the plains of Poland. But the seeds of its destruction were already sown. His ambition was limitless, and his enemies were relentless. The beginning of the end came in 1812, with his catastrophic invasion of Russia. Annoyed by Tsar Alexander I's refusal to comply with his continental blockade of Britain, Napoleon assembled the largest European army ever seen, the Grande Armée of over 600,000 men, and marched on Moscow. He expected a quick, decisive battle, another Austerlitz that would bring the Tsar to his knees. But the Russians refused to play by his rules. Instead of fighting a major battle, the Russian army retreated deeper and deeper into the vastness of the country, practicing a scorched earth policy. They burned villages and destroyed crops, leaving nothing for the invading army to live on. Napoleon captured Moscow, but it was a hollow victory. The city was largely deserted and soon set ablaze by Russian patriots. With no supplies and with the brutal Russian winter approaching, Napoleon had no choice but to order a retreat. The retreat from Moscow became one of the great disasters in military history. Starvation, freezing temperatures, and constant harassment by Cossack cavalry destroyed the Grande Armée. Of the 600,000 men who invaded, fewer than 100,000 staggered back. The disaster in Russia broke the myth of Napoleon's invincibility. Seeing their chance, the nations of Europe, Prussia, Austria, Russia, Sweden, and Great Britain, formed a new and powerful coalition against him. Napoleon, with incredible energy, raised a new army of young, inexperienced conscripts. But he could not replace the veteran soldiers and cavalry lost in Russia. In October 1813 he was decisively defeated at the massive Battle of Leipzig, also known as the Battle of the Nations. The Allied armies closed in on France from all sides. In the spring of 1814, Paris fell. Forced to face the reality of his situation, Napoleon abdicated his throne. He was exiled to the small island of Elba in the Mediterranean. But his story was not over. Less than a year later he escaped from Elba, landed in France, and rallied the nation behind him for one last desperate gamble known as the 100 Days. The European powers quickly mobilized against him once more. On June 18, 1815, near the small Belgian village of Waterloo, Napoleon met a combined British and Prussian army commanded by the Duke of Wellington and Gebhard von Blücher. In a brutal day-long battle, Napoleon's army was finally and completely defeated. The dream was over. The emperor had lost his final battle, and his incredible reign had come to a bloody and definitive end. After the final defeat at Waterloo, there would be no second chances. The Allied powers were determined to ensure that Napoleon could never again threaten the peace of Europe. They chose for his final prison one of the most remote and isolated places on Earth, the windswept volcanic island of St. Helena in the South Atlantic. It was thousands of miles from Europe, a grim and lonely rock guarded by the constant patrol of British warships. Here, under the watchful eye of his jailer, the strict governor Sir Hudson Lowe, the man who had once ruled an empire was condemned to live out the rest of his days as a prisoner. His life on St. Helena was a sad and monotonous routine. He lived in a damp and uncomfortable house called Longwood. He spent his days dictating his memoirs to a small group of loyal followers who had accompanied him into exile. He gardened, read books, and engaged in petty squabbles with Governor Lowe over the conditions of his confinement. In his conversations and writings, he began to carefully construct his own legend. He portrayed himself not as a tyrant or a warmonger, but as a defender of the French Revolution's ideals, a bringer of law and order, and a martyr for the cause of national liberty, betrayed by the old monarchies of Europe. Napoleon's health steadily declined in the harsh island climate. He complained of stomach pains and liver problems, and he grew weak and listless. On May 5, 1821, at the age of 51, Napoleon Bonaparte died. The official cause of death was stomach cancer, though rumors of arsenic poisoning have persisted for centuries. His last words were reported to be France, l'armée, tête d'armée, Josephine. France, the army, head of the army, Josephine. He was buried on the island in a nameless grave, as his British captors refused to allow his name to be inscribed on the tombstone unless it included Bonaparte, while his French followers insisted on Napoleon. In 1840, King Louis-Philippe of France, responding to a wave of popular nostalgia, arranged for Napoleon's remains to be returned to France. His body was exhumed and brought back to Paris in a grand ceremony. He was laid to rest in a magnificent sarcophagus under the golden dome of Les Invalides, where he remains to this day, a site of pilgrimage for millions. Napoleon's legacy is complex and contested. Was he a savior or a tyrant, a modernizer or a megalomaniac? He was all of these things. He was a flawed genius who left an indelible mark on France and the world. A figure whose life of epic ambition, triumph, and tragedy continues to fascinate and inspire. As the sun sets over Paris and the world moves forward, Napoleon's story endures, etched in stone, in memory, and in the hearts of those who seek to understand greatness and its cost. Thank you for joining us on this journey through history. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to like, subscribe, and share your thoughts below. Until next time, let the echoes of the past inspire